Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for helping in. It's a great honor to have you all here. If you don't know me or meet me the first time, my name is Ranto Manyema. I'm a medical student studying radiography in Nigeria, at Federal University of Technology, College of Medicine in Imo State, Nigeria. And apart from my medical studies, I'm also a proficient medical content writer. And today I have an amazing guest speaker. Hey, Z, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, my name is Zainab Hakeem. I go to the University of Georgia. I'm a second year PhD student.
Absolutely, absolutely. So could you tell us what's the major? What's the major?
So, my degree will be in biochemistry and molecular biology, but I do immunology research.
Okay. So before we proceed to the main session, could you elaborate what is you know, how is biochemistry really important in the future method? What do you have to say about that?
Um, So, biochemistry is super important because I feel like when you go to medical school, you learn a lot more about the big picture, like what sort of symptoms you experience as a patient and how it evolves into this sort of disease and how you treat this specific thing. But biochemistry just keeps going like levels down. It's more in depth than microbiology. We're not even looking at a cellular level. We're looking at a molecular level. It's like maybe what does this protein do that causes a chain reaction where it affects this protein and this protein and this protein. Um, so I think that's really important, especially in like diseases that we don't have treatments for yet. That's where biochemistry comes into play because usually diseases are caused by like a lot of diseases are caused by misfolded proteins. They're caused by a genetic mutation, any sort of things like that. So to see the effects of that protein and then those downstream effects, you can maybe target a pathway and see if that affects anything on like a cellular basis. And then maybe you'll scale up to animals and maybe that goes into clinical trials. So even though it's a very small portion of the research pathway, it's the first one. So ultimately, it's important to have.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that first. Biochemistry is very important. I did biochemistry. I was in my second year, first semester, and second semester I did medical biochemistry. So could you tell us what is the difference between medical biochemistry and normal biochemistry?
I've never taken medical biochemistry before, so like um I can't confirm whether this is correct, but I would assume biochemistry is just taking biochemistry is more like these are the sort of pathways that you'll learn, like the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain, um, glycolysis, gluconeogenesis, that sort of thing. Um, and you're learning that all on a very small basis in biochemistry. But then in medical biochemistry, you're probably attributing like this sort of a malfunction in these processes that you've learned can result in these different diseases, is what I assume.
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. You did answer that question correctly because my second semester in my year two, we did medical biochemistry and it was majorly about the malfunctionings of diseases and all such related to human beings though, and yeah, that's great. That's great answer to the question. Thank you so much for answering that question for us. So, are you ready for the first question, Z?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, can you explain the latest advancements in biochemistry research and how they might impact the future of medicine? Tell us.
Um, so my research specifically focuses on sickle cell, and I know that there was a recent FDA-approved treatment for sickle cell using CRISPR, but because it's new, and even though CRISPR isn't fairly new, it's probably 10 or 15 years old now. It's new in terms of treating people with it. So unfortunately, that treatment costs about $2 million, um, which makes it super inaccessible. It's like, great, we figured out this cool thing, but almost no one is allowed to use it because you can't afford it. So hopefully, the more research in biochemistry. I'm trying to figure out other ways that sickle cell. Uh, sorry, let me think. Sickle cell symptoms can be managed, can be treated, um, from like an immunology perspective. I won't go too into my research because it's not super fleshed out yet because I haven't done my qualifying exams or anything. But hopefully we find more than just more ways to treat sickle cell and manage sickle cell symptoms. And the more ways that we find, usually the lower cost they are. Or if we find a certain way, just because we figured out a way to treat a disease doesn't mean that the research for that disease is necessarily done, because there's definitely always a cheaper way that you can figure out how to do it that no one else has found yet. So hopefully we do that with sickle cell, because paying $2 million per treatment sounds really expensive and really unattainable for most people.
Absolutely. It's really terrible to pay such kind of amount of, money just to treat a disease. And could you talk us through your journey from undergrad to your master's and to your PhD level right now? What are the challenges you faced? What did you study in your undergrad?
I
Um,
have a
and your
bachelor's.
master's author.
Okay. I have a bachelor's in molecular biology from the University of Pittsburgh. I'm the first in my family to get a 4 year degree. So it was really difficult to get through college, didn't have the best GPA, but I did have a lot of research experience. So after that, I didn't actually do a master's. I did something called a post-bac program. So it's after your bachelor's degree. I'm a huge proponent for everyone doing this because you don't have to pay for a master's, and for a post-bac program they pay you. um, so there's usually two different kinds of post-bac programs. There's one that's more geared towards med school. Those are the ones that you have to pay for because you're taking a bunch of classes. But the one that I'm talking about is more research focused. Specifically, I did the NIH prep post-bac program, which is reserved for disadvantaged students, so mostly minority students, or students that have a wealth disparity. So students that would usually be on the Pell Grant in undergrad. And it was a really helpful program. It was more research intensive. So I did a lot of research. I strengthened my research background, but I also took graduate level courses as well. So that helped strengthen my undergraduate GPA and let universities know, hey, I can handle my classes just fine, I promise. Um, and one thing that was really, really helpful is that we went to this conference called Abracams. I can't remember what the acronym stands for now, but I think it's the advancement of science for minority students, something in that realm. Um, but anyone who's a disadvantaged student who can come to Abercrams and present their research. And if you attend Abercrams, you get a fee waiver for like 95% of your PhD applications. So I applied to 11 different schools and I paid about $200. And that usually would be well over $1,000. So that was really nice. And then the program also helped with applying to PhD programs. So we had mock interviews, people read over our personal statements and our research statements, and we spent months editing those as well. And that was really helpful for me. And then in the a bunch of schools that I interviewed at the University of Georgia. I really liked it, and here I am now.
Amazing. I mean, you have an amazing journey, Z.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for, expatiating that for us. So the second question goes this way. Are you ready?
Mhm.
Now, how does biochemistry play a role in understanding and developing treatments for complex diseases such as cancer or neurodegenerative disorders? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't really do research in neurodegenerative disorders, although I do know for diseases like Parkinson's. I think it's either Parkinson's or um Alzheimer's. I can't remember which, but there's like a specific family of proteins that are involved in it's Alzheimer's. There's a specific family of proteins that are involved in Alzheimer's. And they have like a malfunction. They tend to like congregate together to form this sort of forgetting the word, but they just kind of clump together and they prevent the progression of other pathways. They kind of block things in the brain. So that can result in a lot of the lack of brain function, not really remembering where you are, a sort of thing. In cancer, I can't say all of cancer just because there's a lot of different kinds of cancers, but in my post-bac program, I researched a protein called PD-L1. It's expressed on the surface of immune cells, and it binds to another protein called PD-1. And this is how immune cells signal to T cells, which is where PD-1 is expressed. Hey, I'm part of your body. Please don't attack me. And I know some kinds of cancers are PD-L1 positive. So those cancer cells also express PD-L1, and they use that to evade immune system detection. So with certain cancers like that, you could be able to target PD-L1 specifically, especially if there's no other markers on the cancer. So like, for example, triple negative breast cancer, it's missing the HER2, the progesterone, and the estrogen receptors. So you can't target any of those. They have a monoclonal antibody drug called atezolizumab for non-small cell lung cancer as well, and that targets the same pathway. It targets PD-L1. Um, so it's really important to focus on these proteins because there's always there seems to be always like a way around that we'll be able to use because it has to cancer cells have to be using some part of the regular body processes to be able to evade detection like this. So,
Thank you so much for answering that question. Um, See, that was amazing. You just nailed the nail on the head. Narrated the main pain points for the audience to, grab something off it. Thank you so much for that.
mhm.
Now, what are some common misconceptions in your own perspective about biochemistry that you think, are important to clarify for the general public? So what do you have to say about that?
um, I wouldn't say that there's common misconceptions about biochemistry specifically, because when I talk about having a biochemistry degree, getting a biochemistry PhD, no one in the general public really knows what that is. They just hear that biology and chemistry are put together and they're like, wow, that sounds super hard. But I know for science in general, I think it's really upsetting that we don't do a lot more scientific communication because a lot of people think we're just making diseases in labs, we're experimenting on ourselves. There's no sort of rules. And also, scientific papers, a lot of scientific papers are written in a way that the average person is not able to read and interpret what is in that information. But at the same time, a lot of them are available to the general public. Um, and it gets really frustrating, especially with like the process of COVID and people were reading papers and it was like, see, you made this disease in China, and that's not at all what the paper says. It's just that COVID existed before, but in different animals. And that's what the paper was talking about. But because people don't have that sort of background knowledge, they didn't know. So I think it's really important for us to broaden scientific communication. It's really important to be able to explain research to the general public so we don't have these sort of misconceptions. Yeah, I think it's just really important to do that.
Okay, so what are you doing? What are you hoping, or what are you doing right now to bridge that gap of, breakage of that misconception from, from the general public? What are you doing about that?
I have a lot of friends who are not in the scientific sphere, so I like explaining to them the research that I do, answering any questions that they have. When at the very beginning of COVID, I would do a lot of explaining on how COVID works, the process of vaccination, the process of clinical trials, because I know a lot of people would be a lot more nervous. And I was like, oh no, it's this is exactly how this is supposed to go. Or when other companies were like, oh my God, we fixed it. And then they would show the results of a paper. And it's like, we haven't fixed it yet. This is just like very baseline research that they've done. It's not, we haven't discovered the issue with this sort of thing yet. I also have my PhD Instagram, which is z.phd. I do have to get better at posting on it, but I do like explaining like specific facets of the research that I do, explaining different techniques that I use, but also just showing like the day-to-day stuff that I do as a PhD student, to show that it's like, yeah, I also have a 9 to 5. I promise I'm not blowing things up in this research lab that you know nothing about.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand. I totally understand. Thank you so much for, three more lights to that. So, the next question goes this way. Are you ready?
Mhm.
Can you discuss can you discuss the intersection of biochemistry and personalized medicine and how it's changing the landscape of healthcare in general?
Okay.
What do you have to say about that in your own perspective?
Yeah, so I do a lot of immunology research. Very recently during my postbac, I shifted more immunology, but still in the realm of biochemistry. And I think that because not every person, so like during my postbac, it was not every person who has this sort of cancer has PD-L1 positive cancer. Not every person who expresses, I do research on NK cells. They might not express like a certain kind of protein or a certain allotype of a kind of protein. So doing it in that way makes it a lot more possible to do personalized treatment, but at the same time, it makes it difficult to do personalized treatment just because if there's a small subsection of a subsection of a subsection of people who express like the kind of genotype that you want them to, then it makes it really hard to find those people, to get blood samples, donor samples, for those kind of things to be able to do your experiments. Um, but it also helps not target the entire body for treatments the way that chemo might. So if you were using atezolizumab, for example, that would bind to every cell that expresses PD-L1, that might bind to a lot of your immune cells, sure, but it's not killing like your brain cells, it's not hurting your bones, it's not hurting your muscle cells, because to my knowledge, anyways, I don't want to confirm or deny, they don't express that same type of protein. Um, so that makes it easier. I don't think we're like to the path of personalized medicine just yet. I think it's definitely going to be a couple more decades on that, if not more than that. But I think we're definitely getting there in terms of doing research. But yeah, obviously, no one has discovered a way to target treatments to a specific portion of the body yet. But when they do, and the person who does that is going to be very, very rich.
I think you called me up there. I want you to do something for me. Um, what do you think about coming to Nigeria to do this, perform this kind of research? Because cancer is really common here in my country, Nigeria. So is in your plan list or your to-do list to come to Nigeria and perform some, and do some, researches about cancer, immunology, and all this, diseases out there?
I don't do cancer research. I do more of sickle cell research. It would be really helpful to get samples from people in Nigeria, just because sickle cell is super prevalent in people in Nigeria.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Sickle cell is really, really
But
prominent in Nigeria.
mhm, but I don't know if that's in the funding because I'm only a second year PhD student. I don't control that kind of money.
It's true. It's true. I'm not saying just right now you're studying because you need to just focus on your studies, which is the most important thing right now. So just like in the future, are you hoping to do some researches on sickle cell anemia in Nigeria because
I
Nigeria is a
think that would
country,
be really cool. I think that would be really interesting. I really hope to found some sort of immune immunological treatment for
Okay.
sickle cell. I think that would be really beneficial and helpful.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people, they travel to do a lot of researches in different nations and all that. So I was just predicting that you could do such a thing in the future.
Mhm. See, a lot of Black people in the United States also have sickle cell. So that's why I think funding sources might be a little less eager to do that. I know at UGA there's a infectious disease department, and they do stuff where they go over to Africa and get samples because like a lot of diseases they have there they might not have here. But um I think it would be less, I mean, at least during my PhD, I think it would be less possible that I could do that. But I think it would be really cool if I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's true. That's really true. So in your opinion, what ethical considerations, should be taken into account when applying biochemistry research to medical practice? What are your takes on that?
Um, I mean, first of all, you can't really do it like a one-to-one sort of thing, like biochemistry findings. You're not going to immediately apply to a clinical trial. You'll probably do some sort of mouse study first and make sure that all the mice don't die, and that it's an efficient treatment for mice. But even then, it doesn't translate directly into humans. Um, Usually, they do a smaller clinical trial, but also make sure that if you're experiencing any pain more than you usually would, that the clinical trial should be stopped and adjusted. Um, if it's causing other problems within your body, the clinical trial should be stopped and adjusted. And I think that it's really important for people to know exactly what they're getting into when they're doing a clinical trial, because they kind of just come up to you with a big stack of paperwork and they're like, well, we've explained it in here, but you also might not know exactly what we're talking about at all, which is where the scientific communication comes back into play.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, there are a lot of people that they're gonna come across this video that know biochemistry measure or don't know anything about biochemistry because they do a lot of other medical courses or something like that. So, how can individuals? That is the last question, by the way.
Mhm.
How can individuals who are not directly, involved in biochemistry or any form of medical research contribute or benefit from advancements in this field called biochemistry? So, what are your takes on that?
I mean, I think it's important for biochemistry advancements to continue because it'll directly impact the medical field, especially with translational research. Usually, whatever we find is disease focused. A lot of the research that we do is disease focused. Not all of the research that we do is disease focused. There's a lot of basic science research as well. But the disease focused research, if we find it in there, the more that we do disease focused research, the more um, treatments that we can try doing in model organisms like mice, rats, ferrets, that sort of thing. And then the more we do those, the more that'll translate into doing clinical trials that have success. Or maybe it doesn't have some success, you take what you learned from the clinical trial and you go back and see, hey, what else can we look at here? Um, so I think it's really beneficial to have that. Um, and it's beneficial to continue that sort of research because even though you might not know what biochemistry is, what it does, we focus on a lot of proteins, and proteins do a lot of things. Like your body is made up of, I actually can't remember the percentage of how much protein your body makes up, but more or less A lot of the processes in your body either involve a protein or are done by a protein. Um, so it's really important to know what those are doing because there's a lot of stuff that we don't know that they're doing. We don't know where they are. We don't know if they're like specific processes that certain proteins are involved in, and we don't know specific processes in which proteins are involved in as well. So, doing basic science research of discovering all these proteins, figuring out the use for these proteins, will be helpful down the line. It might be decades down the line, but it will still be helpful to know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Z, you've been an amazing guest speaker to the audience, and thank you so much for honoring my invitation and coming to talk to the audience about things relating to, biochemistry and the derivatives, therein. And what are your last words, for the audience, to grab something? What are your last words or last advice for the audience?
Um, I guess that science doesn't have to be scary, especially if you don't know much about it. Um, if you know any scientists, they'd be more than happy to tell you about the science that they do. And because obviously they think it's really exciting. And I think it's really important to foster that communication between the community and scientists alike. So everyone is on the same page about what's going on and what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of um the session. It's a great discussion with our prominent guest speaker right here. So, if you love this content, do well to subscribe, share, like, and comment, and share to your network because you'll definitely learn something from this video. Thank you so much. Thank you for hopping on, Z. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.